Hello, communication ethicists. This is the voice of Dr. Sloan. Welcome to week 3 of our COM 4100 class. I'm going to overview a bit of what you're doing in this module, and then I will pronounce our ethicists and frameworks for this week. So module 3 should feel very similar to what we've been doing in the class. You have been assigned a few chapters. You must read chapter 14, you must read chapter 16, and then you get to pick one of the other chapters from part 3 to read. So you will read 3 chapters, 2 have been prescribed. And you will also read the PDF posted here, written by Martin 2015. I think you'll find it a useful reading since the free air chapter is a little bit confusing for us in terms of clearly identifying what Freire offers as an ethicist or as an ethical thinker. And this reading will kind of clarify what neat thoughts he kind of puts out into the world. This week should feel like what we've been doing. We have a discussion prompt connected to what we're reading this week, and you will write a summary and apply the rules with the rules that you establish in that summary in the template. So you have 3 chapters to read, and you'll summarize and apply each of those 3 chapters. And something new that you'll be doing this week is we're actually going to start thinking ahead about a big paper that we'll be writing next week. So next week is an APA, you'll be assigned an APA paper, and the title of the paper is your Ethical Manifesto. And you don't just have to create that out of thin air. In fact, what you will be doing next week is you'll identify your personal morals, the ones that you had even before you took this class, and then you'll pick a first chapter from our textbook that you believe in and it helps you in your ethical thinking, and then you'll pick a second chapter from our class and how you appreciate it and it helps your ethical thinking, and you'll just outline those. So that's the assignment for this week, and outlining that is going to help you get going on content for your week 4 paper. So just to be clear one more time, this is the assignment this week. You'll identify your morals, you'll pick an ethical framework, a chapter, and then a second chapter, and you'll write the rules for each. So this over here in orange is an example it's my personal example. So these are my morals that I've developed from my upbringing and my Christian faith, and I wrote each of them. Please note that they are rules, that they are followable rules. They're not just concepts. I didn't write respectfulness. I didn't write forgiveness. I wrote forgive other people, because that's a rule that if you hear, it tells you how to behave or act or communicate. So for all of these that you're writing in your summaries each week, and of course here in your outline, they need to be clear directives, followable rules, something that you can point your finger and tell someone, try to understand where another person is coming from. That's a directive. So these were my morals, and then I picked a chapter from the textbook that has influenced the way that I make ethical decisions, and then I picked a second chapter from the textbook that has helped me guide my ethical thinking, and I quickly summarized just 3. I mean, you can do more than 3, but just try to start here with 3 rules for each of those. It's a really short little outline, and your point system is broken down here. And again, it's just meant to help you get going on thinking of what's coming for this big paper next week. The other thing going on this week, of course, is your reading. So, and out of the reading comes the summaries and applications. So you read 14, you read 16, and then you pick either chapter 13, 15, or 17 as your additional chapter. And then you'll write your summary and your application for those. So here we are, part 3, and I'm just going to pronounce the ethicists for you and kind of quickly summarize what's going on. Henry David Thoreau is really famous for his book, Civil Disobedience. You may have had to read that in high school. And he presents some interesting ideas of how when we live alone and reflect, that enables us to be thoughtful contributors to society instead of sheep that kind of follow along with the masses. And Craft 2009 has titled her summary of Thoreau's writings mostly, the value of solitude. Chapter 14 is one of the, I believe that's one of the assigned, yes, 14 is assigned to you. So everyone will read about John Locke and his contribution to natural rights, natural meaning inalienable, which is a word that we use in our Constitution, that it is a given right and not based on government, that it is a human right that all humans in all societies should have. And so he's really making the arguments that if you're human, you have these human rights that should be guaranteed to you, and your government for sure should support those natural human rights. So kind of a neat argument that all people have inalienable rights. That's right, that's pronounced. Chapter 15 is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And this is a really neat one, especially those of you who may or may not be familiar with Bonhoeffer, who was a Christian pastor and literally led an underground theological school during Hitler's Nazi reign. And Bonhoeffer is pretty famous for being, he's famous still in our society because he was part of a group of people that plotted to assassinate Hitler. And he actually had to wrestle with his Christian values and his Christian ethics and that decision to execute an abominable human. And so this is kind of a neat glimpse into Bonhoeffer and some of his ethics. So Arnett titles that chapter Courage over or versus Authority. Chapter 16, everyone has been assigned. This is, and the ethicist here is Paulo Freire or Freire. Of course, those are both butchered American pronunciations of a Portuguese or kind of Spanish sounding name. So I have most often heard it pronounced Freire, but if you have at any history in speaking Spanish or learning Spanish, then Portuguese has a similar intonation and flow, and so you might actually be able, if you have a little language history, be able to pronounce this one more correctly. But Freire has made a beautiful contribution to the power of literacy and how education informs our ability to think for ourselves and connect in our society and vote for ourselves and make change in our government because we are educated and literate. So it's neat how he connects literacy to a human responsibility and an ethic. And again, the additional reading that you've been assigned will further clarify what Arnett writes about Freire in chapter 16. Chapter 17 is your last option for chapters to select in part 3, and this is Beasley, 2009, summarizes Hannah Arendt. And Arendt is an amazing figure in history who is a Jewish person who escaped living in Germany before the Nazis took over, and of course had a lot of personal feelings about what happened to her religious and cultural people, and later was tasked with going back and writing about the trials that some of the Nazi leaders had, they were eventually caught and put on trial. And she goes back as a journalist and has to write about these leaders, and actually in the end makes this claim called, or establishes this new idea called the banality of evil. And it's one of the most famous concepts surrounding poor decision making or unethical decisions, which is that if you are just told to do something and you just do it, then you're not even thoughtfully being evil. You're just kind of commonplace living or following evil instructions, which is why she uses the phrase the banality, that we've made it commonplace or easy. Or so it's just a neat chapter, and there's some video in our resources folder that you might really enjoy watching. And if any of you have Netflix, there is a great documentary about Hannah Arendt on Netflix. That is, if you're can embrace your inner geek, is quite riveting. So that's it for the Module 3 explanation and pronunciation video. If you have questions, shoot me an email. Just as commentary, I want you all to know that I have loved reading through your discussion posts and replies to peers. You are thinking critically about these frameworks and how they apply to your life, or how they don't apply and how you don't agree with that framework, that way of thinking about ethics or applying ethics. And I have loved that you guys have respectfully disagreed with one another and continued in these open conversations about ethics. So let's keep it up. I'm looking forward to your Module 3 work.